This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate a movie on what if Team 7 failed the bell test. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now, wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Sakura Haruno fixed her gaze on her rice. Naturally, the foolish boy dressed in orange had become entangled in his own web. In private, though, she thought she had performed worse. As usual, even in the academy, Naruto was the one made fun of, regardless of who performed the worst. And she felt awful about it this time. Naruto had, after all, engaged Kakashi in combat. Hell, Naruto had made contact with Kakashi. Sensei. She had not moved an inch. The annoying, late, obnoxious, masked teacher was one she had not even seen. She had just been duped by some pathetic genjutsu. At this rate, Sasuke would never look at her. She gave Sasuke a quick peek, but her attention was quickly captured by her other teammate's orange form. Cha! That foolish Naruto. He even cut off her thoughts about her one true love in her mind. If only she had been tied to the stump by Kakashi Sensei, she wouldn't feel as horrible then. Sakura Haruno scowled at her rice. She followed a diet, nor did the chicken look very appetizing. All that was done to the vegetables was apply oil. She glanced once more at that Naruto. Orange. Blonde. Idiot. Dumb. Nice. Wait, what? It appeared as though he could really use the food. Sakura came to the painful realization that she was a follower and not a leader during these periods. She was afraid to take the lead. She had only been a part of a crowd of girls who had done the same, even in her one and only truly distinctive pastime of loving Sasuke. Not that she was an insensitive person. That's not to argue she didn't experience guilt. She firmly decided that only if Sasuke offers Naruto his food would she accept it as well. She did not want to blow any opportunities. Haruno Sakura grimaced at her rice and forced herself to feel guilty again. Sasuke, say something. Naruto had a hunger pang. The truth is, it wasn't for the food, he yearned for recognition. He craved the normalcy that the food seemed to provide. He had been special all his life. He just wanted to be normal, like everyone else, for once. What, though, was the point? Not only was he loud and foolish, but he wasn't even a particularly skilled ninja. Not that he had ever thought Sakura would like him anyway. Sakura would never like him. She was no longer the nice, sweet person she once was. He was certainly not a rival in Sasuke's eyes, much less a friend. He would never be accepted or instructed by the teacher. All of those things, love, friendship, kindness, and instruction, were saved for other people. Everything nice was kept for other people. To him, it was just a fact of life, nothing more. He raised his head to observe the clouds above. Naruto briefly entertained the thought that maybe, just maybe, they would give him some food. Sasuke would say, "I'm not hungry," and Sakura would follow, as usual. He had even imagined the scene. Then, gratefully, he would accept it. Though he wasn't all that hungry, and eat heartily. And somehow, they would be surpassed by Kakashi Sensei, and they would become the greatest team ever. That kind of thing would never happen, of course. However, even if it did occur, that very moment, he made a promise to himself. He would give these two people everything he had if they showed him any kindness. People he had always wanted to befriend because he had always wanted to befriend everybody. To the ends of the earth, he would follow them. He wouldn't just divert Sakura, he would genuinely love her. He would do everything in his power to become Sasuke's worthy adversary. But what would he do, if they rejected him? What would he turn into? It all came down to Sasuke in the end. The vigilante was also glancing down at his meal. He knew, maybe too well, how hard Naruto was struggling next to him. Anyway, why should he give a damn about this idiot? Itachi had said he was incapable of making friends. Hate me, his sibling had uttered. Lead a life of misery, he had ordered. And while there was a part of him that disagreed with everything Itachi had said, there was also a part of him that agreed. He had no time to waste on unimportant things like relationships. He had to get stronger and take his family's revenge. The only way he could break through the unbreakable barrier that was his brother, the brilliant Itachi, was to free himself from the ghosts of his past. Still, he gave Naruto a quick look. The one person who didn't feel sorry for him or look up to him was the blonde, and she was the closest thing he had to a friend. Sasuke knew about Naruto's living circumstances as well. Who wouldn't be? It was so damn clear. He and Naruto were the only ones who silently departed the crowd in the middle of the academy when the classes ended and the kids were picked up by their parents. Sasuke wavered momentarily between indecision and caution. His arm seemed to be rebelling against him as his hand trembled to hold his bento. It would be incredibly simple to accept Naruto and become friends with him. They belonged to a similar bird species. Still, he didn't require friends. Although he was strong, Naruto was weak. They were entirely dissimilar. Naruto was just another idiot who would eventually meet his demise, so he needed to be strong. Once more, his fingers quivered. He desired a friend, though. He needed someone to simply smile at him, so please assist him. He desired a partner for training, companionship. Itachi. Itachi cared what? That was before he had friends. Before he could reconsider, Sasuke made a spontaneous move. With his chopsticks in his right hand and the bento in his left, he started to eat. He caught a glimpse of Sakura eating her food next to him, squinting and starting at first. The food felt unbearably heavy in his stomach, but he finished in 5 minutes. The food was actually pretty tasty, so it wasn't bad at all. But for some reason, he felt his stomach turn at the sight of Naruto. Sasuke then pushed it aside and shut the bento box. And destiny took a different turn at that very moment. Kakashi grimaced as he observed his former genin vanish from sight. He had momentarily believed that they would pass. For a brief moment, the Uchiha had accepted that the team would be taken because of his hesitation and the looks the pinky gave the idiot. That wasn't it, though. No, he had never been indifferent to this group, not when his sensei's son stood bleakly in front of the last remnant of Obito's family. For an instant, he had perceived the former members of Team 7 in them and experienced a feeling of thankfulness for what appeared to be a rebirth. The Uchiha had begun to eat, though, at that point. He had witnessed the range of feelings on Pinky's face, including relief, shock, and guilt. The longest was the guilt. It was unexpected. Based on the reports he'd read, he had assumed she would be a cold-blooded kunoichi with a banshee-like voice. The most unexpected, though, was Naruto. Kakashi liked to consider himself to be an open-minded reader. Thoughts from Genin. Level Academy graduates could be read like an Icha book, painless, effortless, and entertaining, regardless of how powerful the Genin were. Well, maybe some Hyuga branch members, but they were stuck up and probably had a toddler's class named, Losing Your Facial Muscles. Accordingly, he had witnessed Naruto's fleeting expression of hope as he looked up at the sky. He correctly identified this as the point at which Naruto realized that his allies could assist him. Subsequently, he noticed an unexpected expression of resolve on the young blonde's face that brought to mind his sensei. But what really disturbed Kakashi was Naruto's response to his teammates' rejection. It was just not consistent. From the start of their academy careers, Leaf Ninja were taught that their allies would support them in any circumstance. Because of this, the person who was tied to the stump would unavoidably turn to their teammates in the hopes of receiving assistance. But Naruto's first thought was that his allies wouldn't be able to assist. This is how it was. His simulation was met with the typical response, "My teammates will help me. What if they don't, though?" Naruto's response, though, suggested the following: "My teammates won't help me. But what if they do?" It was disconcerting. He was so accustomed to that glimmer of hope that he was certain of its outcome. The child who had been trussed up would look around with hope, hesitate a little at the doubtful thought, but cling to that hope and get upset if they were not given assistance. In contrast, Naruto grinned. It wasn't his dazzlingly luminous grin. Kakashi had dismantled that smile, drawn solely from his recollections of Obito, and deemed it to be false. It was not his smirk, the kind of smile Kakashi had once seen, and almost shuddered at, after Naruto had completed the village-wide practical joke involving the painting of the main streets neon pink. It was not even the fake, pleading smile he wore when he bothered Sakura, nor the weary, lazy smile. It was a slight, peculiar smile. It appeared strange on his face, at least. More accurately, it was the corners of the lips pulling upward, as if there were an internal I.told.u.so. Then Kakashi felt a pang of recognition. And he understood why it appeared so odd. It had often been seen on the faces of elderly, experienced shinobi just before a fight. He had witnessed it repeatedly, inscribed on the Sandame's visage. That was a resigned smile. He was momentarily perplexed. How could the small, cheerful-looking blonde boy, who, a small part of his mind claimed, was Sensei's son, but he forced that thought back, have thought that his teammates would desert him? It was, after all, unheard of in Konoha, where skill resided below teamwork and the latter was promoted to dizzying heights. How could a 12-year-old child even entertain thoughts of betrayal? No, why? If he understood that sigh correctly, the boy did not merely consider it fleetingly, rather, he anticipated it and considered seeking assistance only. I can't get assistance from my teammates, but what if they do? Kakashi started walking home slowly and deliberately. He even neglected to inform the team of their defeat. All he could think about was that boy. Even after all the years Kakashi had known about him and had even kept an eye on him in Anbu, the blonde remained such a mystery. Hopefully, the Hokage wouldn't ask him a foolish question to placate the Merchants Guild, even though they had been acting agitated recently. On the other hand, his luck had run out. Now, what will I do? Naruto strolled through the city. He was looked down upon by the late afternoon shoppers, but he'd learned to live with it long ago. He reflected on what had happened during the peculiar genin test. When Kakashi showed up and announced that they had failed the test, they had failed to capture the bells, he had become tied up, and he had not eaten. He stayed for a long time in his fleeting moment of hope. In that instant, it had become glaringly evident to him that he would do anything for those two. He would travel to the ends of the world to be with them if only they had. However, they hadn't. Those two, whom he had long wished to be friends with, had turned their backs on him just like everyone else. Was it that he was the Jinchuriki Kyuubi? Was that the reason he was unique? If only? Oh, how erratic hope could be. He was free to return to the academy. No, he was unable to. If he failed again, he couldn't bear the look on Iruka's face. He was unable to. What would he turn into? How could he respond? And his dream? However, perhaps he could still gain strength. Maybe he could rise and draw attention to himself even if he didn't become a genin. One could still respect Naruto. It was a ridiculous idea, he concluded, extremely ridiculous. He reflected on his exam. I did not perform as well as Sasuke did. Although I dislike saying it, it's the truth. Since Sakura wasn't bound, she must have performed better than me even. I was awful. Not one bell was touched by me. I never would have touched Kakashi if it weren't for Kage Bunshin. Then it struck him. Kage Bunshin. Although he had only recently discovered it, it was already his greatest tactic and trump card. In the middle of the dusty road, Naruto paused and gave it some serious thought. He considered all the advantages and disadvantages. At last, he made up his mind. It was imperative to grasp the moment. Carpe diem. Well, then, if destiny chose not to provide him with a path toward others' respect and love, he would create one on his own. Sarutobi Hiruzen rarely thought he was too old to continue in the Hokage mantle. It had begun, like most days, as an ideal one. The sun shone brightly, his ninja were joyful, coffee was on his desk, he indulged in his students' writings for paperwork in the morning, and his Junin senseis had shown to be, if not brilliant, then at least not stupid. Wait, what? Recall the last one. The Sandaime rubbed his temples and removed the bulky hat from his head, asking, what did you say? It had been a while since he'd felt incapable of bearing the crushing weight of his title. Not long enough, but a long time. On the defensive, Kakashi told him, you should have seen them. You know I didn't want to fail them, he said, softening his voice, and they would have died in the field if I hadn't failed that team. Rolling his eyes, Sarutobi said, yes, I saw them. You are aware that I observed your exam. There is a lot riding on your team. The Hokage realized this. After all, he had been watching, and there had been no chance to spare the catastrophe that was Team 7. They had blown the first and second chances. Yes, so with all due respect, I'd like to apply for an apprenticeship. Though Sarutobi knew that it was ninja life, they die, they lie, they break apart, he had never really given Team 7 much hope. The strange Team 7s of the past had at first succeeded, defying reason and common sense, but they had all eventually fallen apart as well. No one had ever claimed that the protectors were safe. But Sarutobi had hoped that Kakashi would see what he was doing and attempt to save Naruto, and with the Uchiha in the mix, it was almost a sure thing to pass. That is, until the team showed not even the slightest hint of cooperation. Once the Merchants Guild was informed, they demonstrated the rationale behind Konoha's status as one of the top 5 mercantile nations. Many civilians had never witnessed the effects of the ninja who went on outer missions to secure money for Konoha, but the Uchiha had been a constant, calming presence since the city's founding, and they owed them for keeping the inner police force intact. Uzumaki Naruto had been denied access to the Konoha Orphans Fund upon becoming a genin. However, after failing the test, he was no longer considered a genin, so as of right now, he had no access to any funds. Moreover, since he was no longer under Sarutobi's authority as a ninja, any crimes he committed would fall under the purview of the civilian council and police, meaning that he would soon find himself imprisoned or, worse, given a death sentence. Sarutobi could stop them, no doubt, but the option they had presented him with was simple, something that needed to be done regardless, and it would not have required any trouble at all for a bloodless concession of equality to Naruto. At least one thing will turn out easy. muttered Sarutobi, closing his tired eyes. Kakashi, you have full permission to take Uchiha Sasuke as an apprentice. The Hokage opened one eye after a brief period of silence and asked, what are you still here for? Sir, Uchiha is not my choice for an apprentice. Kakashi swallowed hard and said, I'm sure there are plenty of people who will take him. I'd like to be given Uzumaki Naruto, sir. The loud voice of silence welcomed him, obviously having decided she hadn't been heard the first time. Once again, the Hokage closed his eyes and turned to face his great, mighty, terrible city. Minato died for this city, and I will die for it, and we will all die for it, he thought to himself. What a beautiful city this is. What a lovely misshapen outcome. He turned and reached for the words, but they escaped him, so he swallowed and tried his best, saying, they'd put me in a bad spot. Kakashi. It was either make sure Uchiha Sasuke got the best education I could offer, or throw Naruto to the mercies of the Merchant Guild. There's really no connection between the two, Hokage. Sama. I refuse to. They didn't. He was furious, but there wasn't really a choice if it came down to choosing between his surrogate grandson and the council's foolish pride in their final Uchiha. You are currently Uchiha Sasuke's mentor, the Hokage said in a firm voice. It wasn't a suggestion. You will be removed from active duty for the duration of this 2-year period. The volume of Kakashi's voice was abnormally high. So that's it then? Will you permit them to abduct Minato Sensei's son in such a manner? The Hokage remained motionless, and Kakashi stood there for several minutes, shaking from barely controlled fury, before the Hokage said, in a voice that was barely audible, don't underestimate me. The second time around it was not as difficult. It was, if anything, simpler. The tower was essentially unguarded. The first few floors were still occupied by working people, but there was even a window on the 7th level that was left open. From there, the chronic prankster could easily avoid the basic traps and make his way toward the Hokage office. A wire here, a kunai trap there. All of the traps had to be simple because they had to be taken down during the day for easy access, as it wouldn't do for a foreign ambassador to suffer injuries from a security trap. Naruto had known this for years, and had taken advantage of it multiple times. On the 7th floor, there were a few chunin, but they were just wrapping up their final assignments for the night, so Naruto could easily avoid them. He was a skilled practical joker, after all, and had managed to avoid even Junin before. A staircase led directly past the 8th level, which was easily surpassed, to the 9th and final level. There, he paused. Naruto should have been panting heavily, but his breathing was light, because he was a seasoned chaser in the Kyuubi's container. He looked at the door that symbolized his dreams, a large, oaken door that had been worn smooth by time and thousands of admiring glances. Naruto had always wanted to be Hokage, but he had never been able to figure out why. As a child, he wondered if it was because of the attractive hat, and later, he briefly considered the idea that he wanted the affection and respect that a Hokage was entitled to. While he stood in front of the doors, he pondered whether there was another reason. The Hokage, after all, had always been the epitome of strength, and he, Naruto, had always been weak. He wondered, then, if he had simply wanted to be strong. Perhaps Uzumaki Naruto had not desired to be Hokage for some profound, philosophical reason. Perhaps that was not the reason he was drawn to the name. Perhaps it was because Naruto wanted to smile and look down from the top of the world for once. It was obvious that the forbidden scroll was there. For a brief moment, Naruto hesitated, thinking that it was just another trap. He had been tricked once by Mizuki, twice by Kakashi, and he was sure he would be tricked 3 times. However, the scroll had no traps that he could see, and Naruto was an expert at finding and laying traps, disregarding, of course, those times he had been fooled. He made an attempt, and was successful, to brush off the warning feeling. He reached out and picked up the scroll, held it in his hands, and turned away. Kakashi stood calmly in front of the 2 night guards and said, Hokage's orders. One said, of course, Kakashi. Sensei, while the other bowed reverently. Kakashi concluded that there was some benefit to being an Anbu legend. As soon as the 2 ninja left the Hokage tower, Kakashi took a seat for the night watchman, pulled out his orange book, and attempted to read for pleasure. About midnight, he noticed Naruto coming toward him. The boy had changed from being bright orange to a dark brownish black, and at first, it had been difficult to identify him. Despite himself, Kakashi was impressed. If he hadn't been an Anbu and a Junin, he might have missed the child. The boy took advantage of the open window without hesitation, and within minutes he was in and out and gone. If he got the chance to teach the child, he would have to teach him to look underneath the underneath. The simple setup should have made him suspicious right away, and he should have stopped to consider whether this was a trap. Like his father, Naruto was overly trusting, but that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Good luck, Kakashi whispered to the boy, who was too young to hear him. I'll be seeing you soon. Unconsciously, Naruto had made a choice before he realized it. He intended to depart from Konoha. Obviously, he had decided to try for another hour with the Forbidden Scroll after considering his life up to that point and realizing that the one thing that had helped him most toward his goal was that 1 hour with the scroll. Yes, it sounded bad to put it that way, but it had not been like that at all from the beginning. But now that he held it in his hands a second time, he looked out at a village that hated him. Thought of people who had betrayed and despised him, and knew he could linger no longer. Sakura, with whom he had only ever been friendly, had spat on him and called him a loser. She had beaten him with fists and words, but he had never responded. Sasuke, who had been an inspiration to him and a yardstick for his own development, had looked down on him with a blatant disgust. Iruka. Sensei. Even Iruka had hated him for a long time. That silver-haired sensei had dismissed him. His so-called companions during his academy years had passed him without a second glance. And Naruto, like any other child, knew that more time was spent on more important things. Loud kids got more attention, so he tried being loud. He tried everything. Even the Sandaime, though kind, could do little and had no time to do what little he could. Nothing had been successful. He turned away from the mountain with a sort of resignation, though he kept the words, missing, abandon, leave, Nukenin, etc. out of his mind. That moment marked the realization that he could no longer live here as he was. A weak boy who was dependent on others, because everyone inside these walls detested him. Naruto was a boy with nothing left to lose and everything to gain, and he was unstoppable in that moment. It is true that perfection does not exist. The master of every class always faces the possibility of failure in his heart. True invincibility is facing forward and having no fear. True invincibility is standing at the bottom of the ladder rather than at the top. The weakest seed in the ground has nothing to lose but his life and can only grow upward. Carrying the scroll in one hand and a sense of unstoppable determination in his heart, Naruto departed from Konoha and entered the forest. It was dark in the forest. Naruto, on the other hand, had always had good vision in the dark. He could see every single stalk of grass, bending under the force of the wind of his passing, and he ran easily, jumping over dents and ditches in the ground. His kill.me orange jumpsuit, even under layers of paint and mud, glowed to his eyes. The thought of Kyuubi made him want to both thank and hate the being at the same time. Without Kyuubi, he might not have gone through all of that. He might not have been normal. Without Kyuubi, he could not have created so many Kage Bunshin, seen in the dark, or recovered from the frequent beatings he had endured. Without Kyuubi, he might not have gone through any of that at all. His mind lingered on that thought for a moment, hearing nothing but the soft pounding of his heart, the rustle of wind through the trees, and the purposeful sneaky quietness of his feet. What if he was normal? But the moment passed, and Naruto laughed, as he always did, at the flimsy idea. It was better to laugh it off than to think about things like that. When he was younger, he had passed by a pair of brothers with dark hair and gentle faces. The older brother carried the younger one on his shoulders and had a ninja gait, which made people around him turn away from Naruto and look at them. That's the prodigy. Sharingan. Itachi.san. Big brother, don't you smile every once in a while? The younger one had been tugging at the older one's cheeks. The words were lost in the space between them. And Naruto considered those words, prodigy, powerful, and how someone that great could not smile, leading him to conclude that smiling must be a genuinely amazing and difficult quality. Later on, he discovered this was untrue, but the idea persisted in his mind. Thus, Naruto forced his thoughts aside even then, in the shadows, when no one could see him, grinned, and concluded that he had gone far enough to glance inside the scroll for the second time in his life. After 2 solid hours of sprinting, the orange-clad boy slowed to a stop, his breathing just on the edge of heavy. His stamina, which he had cursed before, he was not sure whether to appreciate or curse anymore. It was, after all, a gift of the Kyuubi. Then it was better to bless it. There was no use hating Kyuubi now that it was all he had. All he had was a head full of Kyuubi, a lifetime of painful memories, and the will to overcome. Coming from a village that had hated him, he knew that he had to rise above in order to survive. There was a twinge in his heart as he considered this. Sakura-chan, no, just Sakura, would know the number and the exact wording, but Sakura wasn't here, and she wouldn't care anyway, and that hurt, so he stopped thinking altogether. He was sitting with his back to a tree trunk, thinking about the shinobi rule. What number, he didn't know. Then he picked up the scroll and opened it again. The first thing he saw was the large block of text he had laboriously worked through the previous evening. He sighed, crossed his fingers, and pulled at the paper, revealing more of the scroll, his eyes fleetingly skimming the dense terminology that still perplexed him. He noticed something new in the margin, obscured by the majority of the scroll. A small, sloppy note with an arrow leading to the last, most perplexing sentence, which said, quite simply, clone's memories return to you. Naruto's mind needed some time to comprehend this. Naruto responded quickly to the strange, hallucinatory memories by blaming the fox for most of his problems, so his first thought was, so I'm not crazy, because he'd been noticing strange things about the technique. Things like seeing himself from different perspectives, tripping and falling flat on his face but finding no telltale bump. Things like that. But Naruto, ever the creature of the, you have to see it to believe it, kind, made a clone as soon as possible and placed the scroll in his counterpart's hands, sending it skittering behind some trees. Naruto bolted to his feet and dashed into those same trees a moment later, finding the scroll safely nestled in a clump of grass on the ground, where his clone had left it. Taking the scroll, Naruto started to unroll it frantically. It was accurate, nothing was present there. The paper was thick and smooth, as good scroll paper usually is. It smelled slightly of wood, and it was smooth but rough. Its color was a shade of bread and cloudy, and Naruto's grubby hands begged to tear it and ruin its perfection, and not just because he was a rouser. There was not a trace of ink on the paper. His first reaction was panic. All of that for nothing? He was nearly 2 hours away from Konoha, and he had just committed a treasonous crime to obtain a scroll that held zero value. His second line of reasoning made more sense. Calm down, he told himself, a shinobi thinks. Even though Naruto wasn't a particularly good shinobi and didn't think much, the feeling persisted. I'll see a word the next time I turn this thing, he thought. Maybe they just decided to put a little gap between two jutsu and kept obediently unrolling the scroll. However, nothing was written on the large sheet of paper. And just when most people would have given up and become desperate, Naruto showed signs of stubborn perseverance. He summoned 2 clones to assist him in unrolling the object even more quickly. The paper flew past him, length by length, covering maybe half a mile, and he gritted his teeth as what little hope remained in him vanished before the limitless emptiness. Good heavens, they would never have gotten it all rolled up again if anyone had even scrolled out this far to write on it. He couldn't give up now that he had gone so far. If he just turned it around one more time, he would see writing. Only a thin layer of paper remained, rolled around the wooden roller. Naruto sighed, putting his clones to rest and choosing to wallow in yet another of his failures. He turned the centerpiece 1, twice, 3 times, and one last time, until he reached the very end. Is it too dramatic to say that his life flashed before his eyes? A child, mocked no matter what he did, followed with hateful eyes. A child at an orphanage, with ears that could hear through the thin walls as the matron used his very name as a curse. A young boy, attempting to fix a broken stove. The only student who failed the graduation exam 3 times. The fool who fell into Mizuki Tami's trap. The boy whose team failed his would.be sensei's test. All of his life's experiences had been filled with disappointment. If that was all he had ever known, that he had never succeeded, then how could he possibly be anything other than a failure? Was he not just the monster that society had created, a lonely and desperate boy? Was he not just an unwanted boy? He thought, you were wrong, Sandame. Oja-san. I am a failure, and that's all I'll ever be. I'm sorry. Now, what should he do? That's when he noticed it. Perseverance is the key to victory, he read, and you have persevered. It was just a single line of text, scrawled in a light, messy way at the very edge of the parchment where paper met wood, but he bent down, and in the darkness, his demon eyes easily made out the words. A few more words appeared beneath that text line, where the paper virtually blended into the roller's wood. Hokage Mountain, Yondaime's right eye, seal. Excitement welled up inside Naruto. It felt like a secret message, just like in the book that Iruka Sensei had read to them, where the ninja followed all these cryptic clues and eventually found a way to save a princess. He carelessly rolled up the scroll once more and threw it into the underbrush at the base of the tree, creating a clone that approached and rearranged the branches to hide the bright red dot and cream of the scroll. With a quiet, triumphant laugh, Naruto turned to face his clone, his lone friend, and exclaimed, "Let's go," in what he thought was a heroic voice. The clone cheerfully nodded in agreement. With plans racing through his mind, he gathered chakra to stand and got ready to head back to the Hokage Mountain through the foliage. He would need a distraction, some clones, maybe some rope. Master, Be quiet, I'm thinking, Naruto yelled, keeping up his rapid speed with the clone right behind him. Boss, the clone insisted, what is a seal? Perhaps the largest ninja library in the 5 great nations was the Konoha Shinobi Library. Well, maybe there was a bigger one in the Land of Trees, but that was not a great nation and, anyway, all the ninja, there were just assiduous little librarians, not true ninjas. Because it included jutsu from the highest S ranked all the way down to the most basic E ranked jutsu, Academy Jutsu, it was divided into 5 levels. The E rank level was the first and lowest level, accessible to all genin. It held the Konoha history textbooks, the 3 simplest jutsu, and a catalog of items found on higher levels. To incentivize effort toward rank advancement, the D level, the second level, was only for seasoned genin, that is, genin who had been such for more than 6 months or whose junin sensei accompanied them or granted them a pass. The third level was for chunin, the fourth level was for junin, and the ultimate level was for elite junin or anbu. Apart from security, of course, as most elite junin and anbu didn't waste their leisure time poring over enigmatic old library texts. The upper libraries themselves held very few texts, since anbu classified confidential information was rarely granted to a public location like a library. Instead, it was primarily composed of specialized texts that, although available to lower ranked specialists in minor forms, like Tenten's sealing scrolls, were considered dangerous enough to be restricted to the general ninja. As a result, the library took on a somewhat conical shape, with cylindrical levels that grew smaller and smaller as the stories went up. Since sealing is a risky craft, information about sealing was generally regarded as dangerous, and even the most basic information was limited to B or rank. Not that something as silly as security could stop Uzumaki Naruto, the unstoppable force. This is how it transpired. Uzumaki Naruto, you see, used his incredibly powerful ninja Hokage abilities to pass through the walls and ceilings, adopting a slow motion, dramatic gait as something erupted in flames behind him, reaching levels that were incredibly well secured, and learning the knowledge he needed beforehand. Really, it only took one jutsu and a tiny bit of deceitful good ninja. That day, an hour before noon, a silver-haired, one-eyed Junin with a solitary eye buried his face in an orange book as he strolled calmly through the Konoha Shinobi Library's lower levels, waved absently at the door guard, yo, and slouched down to take a seat on the top-level sofa, which offered a great view of Hokage Mountain. Nobody intervened to stop him. Kakashi walked over to the numerous shelves of scrolls that lay in the brightly lit interior of the room, past the dusty reading area. Presently, he tucked the orange book away and stood up, casually. The door guard had long since settled himself against the door and was reading something. It was only after discovering a whole shelf of books on seals and sealing that Kakashi encountered his first issue. His pouch was so small that only 2 of the books could fit in it. It took him several minutes of tense examination to figure out how the scrolls were sorted. Kakashi screamed at the slightest noises, but that was only characteristic of a war veteran. Kakashi cast a quick glance around, knowing that he shouldn't linger here too long for fear of being discovered. He took 2 books with him and quickly decided to learn what he could from them, opening Basic Seals, which was the shortest, and reading quickly. One of the lesser-known shinobi arts is sealing. While most shinobi do not study this branch of jutsu extensively, sealing can become extremely powerful even in the hands of an amateur. For instance, a shinobi with only a basic understanding of seal creation can create an explosive tag that can level a house, or they can modify a containment seal to store a lake's worth of water. It's pretty awesome, Naruto concluded. The first paragraph, however, may be a little misleading. These seals can be used to level countries and contain oceans, with liberal chakra application, but there is no such thing as a explosion seal or a containment seal. Seals are power lines that allow chakra waves to flow, amplified, and altered. All that is needed for a beginner sealer to know is the special arrangements of these lines, called furu. A seal is created by combining several furu, such as amplify, fire, and eject. He continued driving through the text, even though this was way over the blonde's head, or rather, the semblance of Kakashi's head. Nevertheless, a sealing master can create any kind of seal, including ones that teleport, Hiraishin, grow trees, Yakima method, and even create new furu like the life, created by Takamoto Fujiro of the Sand. A sealing master, on the other hand, is not limited to the 100 of furu when creating seals. A sealing master understands how chakra flows through the lines and how different formations of lines can change the chakra. Naruto swallowed. Sealing seems so complicated, and turned the page, expecting to see another block of text, only to be met head-on by an odd scribble that appeared to be divided into 4 uneven sections and was round and round without any angles. The seal of containment is made up of 4 furu. If you are a beginner, you should practice copying this seal by starting from the upper left corner and working your way down. Make sure you use stiff paper, a good brush, and sealing ink, which is actually 3 parts ink to 1 part blood. This is because the blood is necessary to channel chakra. The space, activate, time, stop, and shield furu make up the containment seal, going clockwise from the upper left. The arrangements appear to be text blocks joined by lines forming a circle, which is the most stable shape for chakra to flow through. This seal is able to hold objects. If an object, like a shuriken, is placed on top of it, the sealer can place his hand on any line in the activate furu of the seal and apply a small amount of chakra to the seal. The object will then vanish. If the sealer needs the object again, he should repeat the process of applying chakra to the seal through his hand. Be advised that this should require a significant amount of chakra. The object will then reappear. After reading the page twice to make sure he understood it, Naruto put his hand on the seal and invoked chakra, feeling the loss of chakra the way a scribe who copies 2 books a day might feel the writing of a character. Was that all the chakra it takes? A blue haze appeared around him for a brief moment. That's about 1/10 of what I use for henge, he muttered in wonder. A puff of smoke billowed from the book. That took a while, the boy remarked, and when the white smoke cleared, he was a little taken aback to see that it had actually worked. Naruto shrugged and tucked the 2 unusual kunai, which had 3 prongs and seemed more fragile for some reason, into his kunai pouch. Then it dawned on him, if this works, I can just take out and seal all the books. All that's left is to locate a piece of paper, a brush, and ink that contains blood. It was going to require some time. After a day, he reappeared as a brown-haired smoker wearing the green Konoha vest. Realizing he needed to choose a Junin in order to enter the upper level, he finally came across a man heading a group of genin he knew: Shikamaru, Shoji, and Ino. He had spent some time observing the team while posing as a female civilian. They were dining at a well-known barbecue restaurant that he had never visited due to cost. The man appeared amiable, grinning and laughing readily. He talked more than the prospective sensei and was obviously quite sharp because he was a Junin. After he glanced up at around the 10th minute, Naruto blushed and turned to leave, trying to look like a girl who had a crush on him. The blonde was now relieved that he had taken the time to perfect the girl act. Hey, he said to the same Chunin guard as he strode back into the library. There have been a lot of visitors recently, the guard said, looking perplexed. Curiously, the brunette Junin looked up. Have any other people come here? May I ask? He asked. After a pause, the Chunin confided, but he might have come only to get the Icha Icha collection. Kakashi-san. His gaze fixed on the hidden Naruto. There's a section for those on this level. Icha Icha. He vaguely recalled seeing that on a poster ad near Konoha, his home district. It was a small, orange book, the same book that Kakashi had read on the fateful day of his genin test. It is quite unusual for a man to have a book like that in his weapons pouch. As far as Naruto could tell, though, it was the right response, because the man relaxed and waved him through the door. He walked through immediately but only relaxed when he heard the telltale thud of the guard sitting down again. Nah, he's got all of them, Naruto guessed, the guard clearly suspicious. He started working right away, one hand fishing the paper, brush, and ink jar from his pouch, his feet guiding him to the book aisle. He'd left all the books there after his last visit because he thought it was too dangerous, smoothing out the paper and pulling out the book, quickly turning to the page with the seal. His hands traced the seal's shape onto the rice paper with ease. It was a talent from a lifetime of carelessness. Everyone had been amazed at his level of skill when they had discussed forgeries in class. I told you that I was skilled at this kind of work. Iruka looked from one sheet to the other, but Naruto exclaimed in triumph. Other than the inkblot on the original copy, which he had even attempted to replicate fairly well, there was really no difference. Iruka reluctantly said, "It's really very good," and suspicion crept into his thoughts. Did you really do this, Naruto? The boisterous, brazen jester couldn't have performed so well on a task that even Iruka found difficult, could he? Obviously. The boy explained, with his cheeks puffed out and eyes unabashed. Nobody thought that he was lying. Well, nobody but her. Haruno Sakura slipped through the crowd and quickly examined the papers. Isn't it great, Sakura? Chan? Haruno Sakura led Sasuke's fan club, so Naruto prodded her. If she said nice things about him, someone would have to agree, right? "There's no way you could have done this," Sakura said with a smile that was more triumphant than congrats. Naruto heard someone nod loudly in agreement, but his whole concentration was on controlling the raging heat inside of him. "I bet you failed so badly that you decided to take Sasuke. Kun's work for yourself," she said. Horrified by this development, Naruto was unable to voice his objections. "Isn't that correct, Sasuke-kun?" There was a tense silence as Naruto stared at his dark-haired classmate. Eventually, the Uchiha nodded once, slowly. Sakura turned to him, a triumphant glint in her eyes. He turned to the boy. Surely Sasuke's pride would keep him from accepting this, right? She looked beautiful then, the way a soldier kills beautifully. She had gone in to win, and she succeeded, aided and abetted by the unwavering faith of all those around her. Thus, his paper was exchanged for the Uchihas, and everyone applauded the genius, despite the boy's own frown. Naruto looked down at his paper, which contained Uchiha Sasuke's stifling, cramped writing, and grinned as he heard the compliments because, in his opinion, they all belonged to him. He stole 2 sheets of paper the next test day, and finished one with his usual pitiful, .it, blank performance. On the other, he made an effort, but failed miserably, writing in Sasuke's handwriting, which he had studied over the weekend. Naturally, as he turned it in, he palmed the bottom sheet, which the Uchiha had turned in first, and slid his fake there instead. He nearly stopped when he heard the loud crinkling of paper as he folded Sasuke's test to fit up his sleeves. And later, after class, the Uchiha was dragged apart for a talk. The best way to serve revenge was to wear a mask of harmlessness and innocence. He heaved the dozen or so books onto the sheet, then, laying a hand on top of it, mumbled, "Seal." A little after 2 seconds, a puff of white smoke, a leftover from a remedial class, he remembered, enveloped the books and vanished. "Is everything in there in order?" The guard felt the brief burst of chakra and peered into the room. Seeing Asuma reach up to the top shelf, which was absurdly high, he laughed and turned back around. After 15 minutes, the Chunin looked inside and exclaimed, "You have a message for me. Says you have to go to a Junin meeting in 45 minutes. Naruto nodded in agreement and continued to thumb through a text marked, "Genin Lessons." It contained some pretty interesting team building exercises, such as tree and water walking, that he could probably combine with Kage Bunshin. After a half hour, Naruto emerged from the library carrying a dozen or more smuggled books in the face of an elderly smoker. He waved goodbye to the Chunin guard and slouched through the front doors, making his way to an alleyway before removing his disguise and tearing off. Secondly, Asuma was late for a scheduled Junin meeting. That is, Kakashi arrived before him. Normally, this wouldn't stop the meeting, but since 2 Junin were absent from the relatively small force, nothing got started. Sarutobi became enraged and sent Kurenai to look for Asuma, who was left feeling very angry after having to wait for 2 hours. And ever vigilant Kakashi was on a whole other level, but the drowsy, gullible Asuma, who had just taken a nap with his Genin team, was no match for the furious femme fatale. Naruto had studied more hours in the last 2 weeks than he had thought possible, and now, after 2 lonesome weeks filled with nothing but agonizing studying and scavenging, he had finally finished the basic sealing book. The boy sped through the trees. Not that he had studied non-stop, he had spent a good day or so trying to make the tree climbing exercise he had read about in Genin Lessons, but he had only managed to get up to about 20 feet in the air. A change of clothes was in order, as the orange had outlived its welcome and the brown paint and mud had worn off. He had made a total of 15 trips back, under the guise of various different people, and bought with stolen money or simply stolen many lifetimes worth of paper and ink and lost more blood than was good for his health, though the demon fox must have protected him. Orange didn't go well with green foliage, though it had been great for stealth training and taking it off and certainly thrown his past pursuers numerous times. On the other hand, it was perfect for the Hokage Monument and various other buildings in Konoha without being overtly sneaky, if there was such a thing. At last, Naruto made the decision to examine the seal, believing that he would be able to identify its type at the very least. His heart and feet pounded as he crossed the rooftops, under the mask of a boy he'd known fairly well this time. It was a rapidly dissipating pain, anyway, because Sasuke was still one of the people he could imitate the best, even though it brought up painful memories. Naruto easily avoided many other traveling ninja thanks to his single-minded determination and haughty-than-thou attitude. The chakra he used to strengthen his inner muscles and bones far exceeded that used for the henge pro. The fox meant he didn't even need to strengthen his insides, and if any of the ninja passing him noticed it, they quickly wrote it off as a genin wasting a little more chakra than he needed. con. It seemed, according to the Genin Lessons book and numerous exploded bits of tree, Naruto was always wasting chakra. He barely paid attention to the woman's instructions, distracted by the knowledge that if she had known it wasn't the Uchiha, she wouldn't have been kind at all. If she had known, she'd actually been kind to Uzumaki Naruto, the demon, the bastard, the ignored, lonely orphan. When he heard her say, "Good luck," he couldn't even make an attempt to grimace. Instead, he turned around and walked away. As Naruto arrived at the Hokage Tower, the late summer heat was melting the rooftops, making him forget how big Konoha was and how many infernal ninjas ran around there, making him duck to avoid the troublesome ones, like Iruka Sensei, whom he passed at least 3 times. Somehow, shouldn't he have been in class, teaching? There were no more rooftops between the Hokage Tower and the Hokage Monument. Instead, there was a stretch of greenery and multiple training fields. The academy was to the right, and a tall, metal building that Naruto had never seen was to the left. It was, after all, not exactly an open invitation, given the shinobi sentries stationed in front of it. At the top of the monument, visitors could descend an observation deck to study in greater detail the exquisite craftsmanship of the stone faces, which from a distance looked more like stone counters. The ascent could be made up of 2 flights of stairs on either side, or straight up the mountain face, though no one attempted that. Naruto figured he could take a stab at it with the tree walking exercise, but the wall was much higher than his 20-foot record. The observation deck was positioned so that guests could not touch the stone, but the sculptors could move it closer when they wanted to carve a new face into the mountain. Naruto had used this device to paint the monument during his last year at the academy. Fun times. The idea itself was simple and he'd used it not too long ago. He was just relieved that they hadn't thought to change it and make it more Naruto. Proof. There were a few cranks and bolts that he had to adjust, as well as the pulley system and the placement of the upper supports. It was helpful occasionally to avoid pulling the same joke twice. As he climbed in, the metal clanged noisily and his weight strained against the ropes. He wondered again if this was safe, but ultimately decided that he didn't care and that the fox in him would probably keep him safe even if he fell. Fortunately, the 4th's face was right there. Naruto drew at the ropes that connected to the pulleys, positioning himself in the center of the deck to prevent it from swinging wildly, the rough ropes rubbing against his hands, but by then he was close enough to the massive right eye to feel it. A label. The lines of seals were familiar to him from hours of staring at them every day, but it still looked like plain old sandstone as he drew himself within inches of the 4th's eye, close enough to highlight the imperfections in the stone. He couldn't see the entire seal, but he had to concede that the Yondaime was nothing short of a genius. A splatter here, a bit that looked exactly like bird poop. Maybe it was authentic. Some fine cracks in the sandstone, and a dusty, slight change in color, a strip of a different kind of stone, came together to make the most expertly disguised seal Naruto had ever seen. There was a crack here, a line there, tiny variations in color and tint. The Yondaime must have somehow run chakra through those items. Perhaps there was a layer of the standard ink dot and blood underneath? Blood was an excellent conduit for chakra, and when combined with ink, it was useful for creating seals that did not always need to be hidden. One could also create seals that were solely composed of chakra, though those glowed with the blue hue of chakra and were well beyond Naruto's abilities. He was unable to conjure up a seal in his mind at once. He had no idea how to shape his chakra into a seal, and he had no idea how long it would take to learn how to run seal. Forming chakra through non-conductive elements and string together a seal that way. There was a magnetic pull between things that formed seals. Once a seal was made, it tended to stay that way, even if the leaves were left loose on the ground. Otherwise, there was a risk that this devious disguise would have worked against the seal, and its contents would be lost forever. However, Naruto had only encountered book seals, which were authentic but not ninja, so perhaps all real ninja seals were just like this. He took a closer look at the seal. It was the simplest kind, one that, once activated, would force anything inside the seal out. If there was nothing inside the seal, what was on the activate furu would go in. There wasn't even a entry furu to insert something into the seal if it already held something else. There, the space, largest, a small activate, a shield, and a time stop working together, they created a shielded pocket of space outside of time. Seal for containment. It was the first lesson he had ever received, and it troubled him to think he could have learned this on the first day. But it was so simple. How could this have stayed a secret for all those years? Despite the fact that ninjas, tourists, and regular people all knew about seals, none of them could identify one? Naruto shamelessly disregarded the fact that, until 2 weeks ago, he had no idea what a seal was. The Yondaime carving, which took several months to complete after Iruka Sensei took up the Hokage mantle, must have been sealed close to the day of the Kyuubi attack, when the village was too devastated to go around meddling with the monument. That was when Iruka Sensei's forced feeding of history lessons began. It was not too unbelievable for a masterfully crafted disguise created by the Yondaime himself to have remained a secret for 13 chaotic years, especially since Konoha had never fully recovered from the attack even 12 years later. Naruto had persuaded himself with that thought that the seal and everything about it was not a trap. He touched the part marked, release, or activate, with an unsteady hand and saw all the fine lines and furu in the seal, the superb craftsmanship, the natural feeling of it all, but as he closed his eyes, everything vanished. He channeled some chakra to his hands and sighed, not having the energy or confidence to say, activate, loudly at that moment. We can only hope for the best. It was soft, like a breeze, and somehow familiar. Uzumaki Naruto. At the forest's edge, Naruto stopped. He was running faster than he had ever run in his life, and he held round, cylindrical scrolls that felt like paper and knowledge. The greatest shinobi who had ever lived had written them. However, he stopped, and he cast a glance around. Not a word, not a rustle, not a single person could be seen. However, he saw a scroll, a piece of paper, and something on top of it right in front of him. Having been thoroughly educated about the countless varieties of explosive seals, which go this way for a larger explosion, this way for more fire, this way for more noise, this way if you just really want to kill somebody, he was naturally inclined to be cautious around paper. But his curiosity and keen vision overcame him, and in a matter of seconds, he was at the paper after landing on one foot and pushing with his ankle. He smelled old blood and scentless soap, along with ninja. Thus, this had been left for him by someone he recognized by name and whose voice he could identify. Someone who, for some reason, felt that he should have a scroll with a lavender sticky note on it, a stainless steel Konoha dog tag, for identifying dead bodies and discrete affiliation identification, and a shiny new Konoha forehead protector. Naruto. As ninjas, we spread like a sickness throughout the planet. Diseases from both nations killed half of the populations of the people of the mountain and the people of the sea when they came into contact. However, the illness was merely attempting to endure. Follow suit and make it through. GG. He stopped, suppressing a laugh and a cry of indignation. Is he telling me to kill people? What does he say? He removed the sticky note and adhered it to the inside of his newly acquired forehead protector. He had left many things from his previous life in his apartment, including Iruka Sensei. Next, he perused the scroll. I, Sarutobi Hiruzen, Konoha's Sandaime Hokage, do now grant permission to Uzumaki Naruto, Konoha's Information.Ninja, to travel the world and gather as much knowledge as possible. The acting Hokage of that era is to receive him upon his return to Konoha in 5 years. He is required to submit yearly reports to a Konoha representative at locations at their discretion up until that point. Ninja Information. Naruto turned to face the Hokage tower after glancing up at the sky and asked himself, what even is that? He chuckled after that. He paused, uncertain of what to say, uncertain if anyone would hear him at all, and said, thank you. I think you can see me, old man, he said to the tower, because I'm starting to feel like you're omnipotent. But it felt too serious and too soft, so he spoke up, saying, believe it or not, I'm still going to be Hokage someday. Perhaps he was no longer a true believer. Perhaps he was just angry, hurt, and tired, but at that moment, he truly believed in the Hokage and in Konoha. Perhaps he was still a fool. Perhaps the years of screaming things at the top of his lungs had worn him down, but at that moment, he believed in it. Then, he pictured himself coming home in 5 years, victorious, knowing that Konoha would accept him back, that Konoha would want him back, and that Konoha would welcome him home. He pictured himself standing at the head of the Yondaime, strong and self-reliant, refusing to take no for an answer from any random villager, and looking down from the top of the world. Kakashi had been observing until Naruto got up from his seat and began reading the letter. Throughout the letter, he had observed the boy's expression change. He observed a single, childlike hand grasping the scroll. He observed until the pale gray, brown back of his sensei's son vanished into the foliage. He remained there until he was no longer able to feel, hear, or smell him. You might never see him again, something inside of Kakashi whispered, and that little piece was choked up by the rest of Kakashi until it shriveled and died. Naruto possessed strength. It had taken Kakashi 12 years to watch him. Even now, after witnessing the boy at both his best and worst, he was still coming to terms with the fact that Naruto had gone through hardships that he was unaware of. Even though there were always eyes on him, He had never been able to help until there were no eyes left to watch. However, on occasion, he would be freed from the oppressive bonds of the law. Occasionally, he would walk into the apartment and leave the smallest, most embarrassing things. A new milk carton, a gift, or a gentle touch on the forehead of a young boy experiencing bad dreams. He wondered sometimes why he hadn't done more for the boy. Which law was it? One of the best Anbu commanders they had ever had. Could the law even touch him? Nevertheless, Naruto was spared from death by the law. It may have wounded him, but perhaps the harsh law had also strengthened him. He took a big gulp. Now Naruto was no more. However, they had left first. He had remained and observed, almost metaphorically, as the commoner and the ninja both turned their backs on Naruto. And Naruto had given up on his futile writhing in the ropes that Kakashi had tied after he had watched them go, and Kakashi was attempting to figure out how to help without drawing attention to himself. He'd slipped out of the bindings with almost ease and moved on, never turning around. Perhaps in 2 years, once he had fulfilled his responsibility of training the Uchiha and keeping a close eye on Naruto, the boy would make a comeback and Konoha would finally get to see what she had lost. As a link to Obito, a young man driven insane by his past, Uchiha was just one of many members of his clan who had lost their minds. With the right training, Naruto would be more valuable to Konoha than anyone else because he had been strengthened by his past. Kakashi, at least, had faith in him. For a very long time, Kakashi had not trusted anyone. He'd forgotten the pleasure it brought. Naruto didn't see the contact list on the back of the scroll until a few days or weeks later. To the rest of Konoha, you are regarded as a failed genin and a civilian for the sake of secrecy. The people you can trust are the ones you have connected with. Sarutobi Hiruzen, Sandaime Hokage Jiraiya the Sage of Toads. Commander Nara Shikaku of the Junin Chief of Staff Morino Ibiki. Elite Sarutobi Asuma Junin Elite Hitaki Kakashi Junin. Those on this list may add contacts to this list. Exercise caution and stay safe. Best wishes to all. Kakashi, the man who had failed Team 7, the almost. Sensei, the would.be. Sensei? He was furious for a week or perhaps a month. What was time, to him? During which he traveled, read, and learned while going about his daily business amidst the throngs of unfamiliar places. He was afraid, depressed, and furious that he was supposed to put his trust in the man who had started it all. He might be in Konoha still if it weren't for Kakashi. Had it not been for Kakashi, he might not have known how to make seals, climb trees, or travel from town to town for profit. It's possible that he lacks the ability to joke around and laugh with new people. He may not possess the Yondaime scrolls, and he may not be able to walk on water. It's possible that he is not learning from wind scrolls penned by Yellow Flash. He was put on a team that included a girl who bullied him and a boy who didn't seem to care for him. Naruto discovered that he wasn't angry after that week, that month, or a period of time that wasn't fully calculable. He was perhaps even a little appreciative. Though he had wanted to wake up the next day to find a team on the bridge, a wonderful, nostalgic second chance at being a team, Kakashi saw him sooner than he had anticipated. Rather, he didn't see the boy for 2 months. Kakashi didn't accomplish anything during those 2 months. His usual day would start a few hours late, involve taking Sasuke on a D rank with another team, and then, conveniently, vanish. He had nothing at all against the boy, really. In reality, he was trying his best not to be biased, but maybe the way the child behaved, his haircut, his sad eyes, and the looks the civilians gave him annoyed him a little. It was more of him defying the Hokage's orders and the Merchant Guild's haughtiness. Especially since they had no more Naruto to threaten him with, they were unable to make him do anything. Occasionally, he would turn to face Sasuke and see Obito, and the boy would transform into him, enveloped in Obito's skin and leading the life that Obito deserved. Sasuke, who wasn't that much like Obito, could just be too much like Obito, and it was annoying that there weren't any other black-haired, pale-skinned, Uchiha, high-bred-faced boys around. However, he wasn't at all like Obito, and perhaps Kakashi would have liked him more if he had been. On the other hand, Kakashi might despise him if he was anything like Obito. Furthermore, it was clear that he was making Kakashi crazy since Kakashi was losing the ability to comprehend his own feelings for the boy. So perhaps, in a small way, he did despise him. Both of them became increasingly gloomy, reclusive, and immature until Kakashi finally decided he could take no more. He learned how to walk in trees from Kakashi on the first day of his 3rd week with not Obito. He nearly wished he had passed the team as he watched the Uchiha charge up the waist and tree chakras. He could just picture Naruto there, akin to Obito in Sensei's flesh and bones, comfortable and incongruously familiar at the same time. He knew Naruto, but he couldn't speak for the girl. But then they would be fighting, he realized. He was certain that Sasuke felt lonely in his misguided heart, but they wouldn't be alone. He wasn't sensei, and he couldn't sew together adolescent hearts, so they would argue, fight, and hurt each other. Thus, the month went by while he read, watched, wished, and taught a little. "I want a C rank." Kakashi gave the child a look. Indeed, he was older than Kakashi had ever been. But Kakashi was well aware that he was not a benchmark for youthful shinobi. He saw a boy who was in desperate need of self-proving when he looked at him. Anxiety was not a good thing, however, it was sufficient. Kakashi granted the request with an almost imperceptible nod to the Chunin. "Yes," the Chunin replied with a sigh, "but you can't go alone." "I can do it." The Chunin said, "Well, the rules book says you can't." He looked like he was really trying not to laugh. A large number of ninjas disliked the Uchiha, viewing them as technique thieves and bastards, and the civilians would always give them discounts simply because they had the easy task of keeping the quiet streets of Konoha under control. Surprisingly, it was Ino who saved Sasuke. Since Sakura's failure in the Genin test, Ino has been out of sorts. She was, at least, as insane as one could have imagined, at least from the perspective of a drunken Asuma. Despite having read the files and seen the recording, he appeared somewhat irate towards Kakashi when he made this statement. Such a team had no chance whatsoever. The younger Sarutobi stated that she has been training. She has been reserved, hardworking, resentful, and cynical. He said, "She's too young to be acting like this." "Nobody is too young in the world of ninjas," Kakashi assured him. He observed Asuma recall who he was conversing with. Saw the man recall Kakashi. Observed him sulking to Kakashi about being too youthful. Asuma cut off, and Kakashi didn't bring up the subject. He kept his dreams of passing the team a secret from Asuma, but he knew they would rip themselves apart. No longer did Ino give Sasuke an adoring look. It was almost like a scream, almost like a glare, almost like retaliation. Kakashi waited to see Sasuke's response, but he never did. The boy was too affected and blind. He saw only the shadow of his brother. Perhaps Sasuke needs a psychiatrist, Kakashi thought to himself. The idea turned into a task for his to-do list. The following day, they arrived at Wave with their inebriated client. Kakashi pondered how much her team had benefited from Ino's metamorphosis. They had become more alike, at least in their distaste for Sasuke. Asuma was obviously pleased with his pupils. Silently, Kakashi wasn't all that proud of his. Sasuke dispatched one of the demon brothers as soon as he appeared by using a lot of fire. Sasuke moved in and took a shot at the second ninja just as quickly as Ino. Shika. Sho had done, taking him down in a fashion that would have allowed for instant interrogation. Observing the formation waver, Kakashi let out a sigh, watched the enemy duck away, and moved in to finish him off. "Sasuke," he exclaimed right away, "what is the #1 rule of Konoha Ninja?" Sasuke thought of him with malice. He declared, "The mission comes first." Kakashi let out a sigh, saying, "Right and wrong, Sasuke," he spoke. Asuma looked at them directly and said, "The team comes first." Team Asuma reflected their teacher. Kakashi ignored each one of them. "How can you do the mission without your team?" "Help is not needed," growled Sasuke. "I'm not weak." "No," concurred Kakashi. "But you're definitely not strong." Kakashi refrained from mentioning that the Yondaimi's back was to his team when he displayed strength. Obito's back stood strong in front of him, saving him. The boy's strength lay in his fox. Like nature, which surrounded him and extended his back to face Konoha. Kakashi had never been strong. Strength was something else entirely. When they decided to carry out the mission again, he remained silent. For up to S-class missions, 2 Junin were more than sufficient, particularly him and Asuma, 2 high Junin, especially when it came to guarding a young Genin team. It wasn't because he remained silent, though. Perhaps Naruto would be somewhere along the route to Wave, Kakashi thought. There was a connection between Naruto and Sensei, somewhere in his mind. He secretly hoped that Naruto would be able to save both himself and Sasuke, who was wounded from battle and death. Even though ninjas killed, maimed, and broke people, there was something about their golden hair and sunny blue eyes that spoke of healing. It was unexpected for Kakashi to actually find Naruto there, and most definitely not on the other side. However, as the enormous sword shot through the atmosphere, something, a whisper, a presence, was heard. He ducked, pinned Tizuna to the ground, and retrieved a kunai toss. He slid his feet into a relaxed, prepared stance. Beside him, Asuma has her knives out. Sasuke in the rear. The group formed a rough triangle. And Naruto, with his face hidden by a porcelain mask in the mist laden with chakras. However, nothing covered up his sun-kissed hair or his chakra signature, which was very similar to his father's. Aware that a mistake would likely result in the renowned copy nin falling on his head, Zabuza, Demon of the Mist, killed his class, a rank, bounty of 20 million, moderately challenging, watch out for the sword, cautiously circled around them. About Zabuza, Kakashi was only half serious, though it was difficult to sneak in on different sides like this. He and Asuma would not kill Naruto. He needed to speak with the boy. He needed to see him. He had to inquire about his situation, how he was doing, whether he needed anything, and whether Kakashi could help. New blood welled up in place of old guilt. "Hey!" exclaimed Zabuza. If he knew that both Naruto and them were from Leaf, Kakashi realized he would not use Naruto's name. The boy must be recognized by Asuma. Desperate to get Asuma to stop targeting Naruto, Kakashi wanted to pull the admittedly ignorant man aside. He moved and said, "Take care of the brats." "No issue," Naruto replied. Kakashi was reminded of the deeper tone of his voice. He thought he's grown, at once sentimental, joyful, sad, and amazed. Kakashi hoped that Naruto would become a sensei because one day he would be like his father. The sword then came at him, so he made a water clone, followed by a replacement that was quicker and faster and caused water to fall from the split halves of the buncheon. Repeat. Kunai to a loosely bandaged neck, slice, and jump back to switch with a buncheon. It's a water clone. Good, the team was gathered around Tazuna. Kakashi created a shadow clone and then a replacement after Asuma intervened and destroyed another water clone. The buncheon vanished from sight. There was no water odor coming from the Zabuza in front of them. There was a small silence while Zabuza caught his breath, observed them, and wished they had none of their flaws. He raised his headband to show off his scarred Sharingan eye, the legacy of Obito. He had promised that the world would eventually learn about Obito's legacy, and it did. Zabuza winced slightly, but the Sharingan noticed. A metallic clang came from the children, as 3 Naruto clones effortlessly and slowly circled around them, merely holding them in position. What prevented Naruto from pursuing Tazuna? Zabuza's hands moved so quickly that Kakashi was left with no time to think as it burned into his eyes, brain, and hands simultaneously while they performed the seals. He yelled with Zabuza, "Water release! Water dragon!" The Sharingan ate at his chakra, burning in his temples, draining it, but he had plenty left over. Asuma launched 2 wind releases in Zabuza's direction, but a Naruto unexpectedly appeared and blocked it. Shit. But Zabuza grinned at them as if Naruto were his own, and it was a clone. "This marks the end for you," declared Kakashi, his heart pounding with adrenaline. He focused solely on the Sharingan, disregarding everything else, including bandages, eyes, hand seals, chakra flickers, and jutsu twists, until he achieved his goal. He hardly noticed Asuma swearing under his breath as he approached the group, completely absorbed in the water he had collected, swallowing Zabuza, securing an electric charged chakra in his palm, and entering. There is just enough chakra left. With a swift throw of a Senbon's glint, a shadow shot out of the trees. Even just to avoid colliding, Kakashi hesitated. Saying, "Thank you," the hunter.nin spoke. "Scam. Scam. It looks like Naruto is in danger. Then my chakra, oh my god. It had been too much for the last push. He had overindulged in the Sharingan, attempting to complete the jutsu ahead of Zabuza. In a battle, he could keep his Sharingan open for hours at a time. He would allow his fury to rule him. Tiredly and quickly, he looked around the team. Could they not recognize blonde hair after seeing it for a year? Asuma and the 4 were okay, getting back on their feet. "Did you see how I held that masked ninja off?" Asuma asked. Sasuke frowning, Asuma grinning and nodding. Half falling, half lowering himself to the floor, Kakashi pulled a headband over his eye and fell asleep. Upon awakening, Kakashi went in search of Naruto right away. Not really, though. Naturally, he awoke first and looked around him, an ancient, rickety wooden bed in a slightly musty room. All right. Then, he had to go greet Sasuke with as much nonchalance as possible, as if he hadn't left the house in the previous 2 days and didn't wonder what had transpired. Under the pretext of saying hello, Asuma gave him a brief report. He exclaimed, "Glad you're up." Kakashi laughed amiably and reassured Asuma that he was still sick and unable to keep watch. "We've just been working on 2 against 2 sparring. Tazuna's in the house right now with his daughter and grandson, eating breakfast. I've been watching the perimeter. Maybe I'll get some shut-eye." Asuma gave a small pout. The children chuckled and resumed their sparring. It was good to see Sasuke looking a little brighter, Perhaps the two amiable boys had assisted him earlier. I'm going to go check out the town, Kakashi then said to Asuma, and Asuma nodded as if they were unaware that he was going to look for Naruto. Do you want to see him? I'll be back by dinner time. Do you want to go? Because of his connections, Asuma was one of those people who might be aware of Naruto's ancestry, but Kakashi wasn't sure if he cared or knew. Having participated in Sarutobi's contact session, he was aware of which other ninjas were aware of Naruto's unusual status. However, he may not have been aware of Naruto's background or the experiences the young man had. Maybe later, he uttered. Kakashi paused and nodded. You're enough, right? With genuine concern, Ino inquired, are you okay, Kakashi? Sensei? He had been one of her father's friends. For some time, he was a war-torn teenager that her mother bribed with tea and who spent time with her father. One could argue that a girl's ability to infer a ninja's psychological trauma from his interactions with her father was noteworthy. With a smile, he said, I'll be fine. Then he left through the door and entered the trees near Tazuna's house, the air filled with the smell of wood, salt, and water. If he hadn't been Hitaki Kakashi, he would have assumed that nobody was there because it was quiet except for a few lone gulls calling over the sea. However, Kakashi's peripheral senses picked up on the 3 chakra holes right away. They trailed after him as he made his way to the coast, pausing to sit at the water's edge. Let's sit together, he said. When a gull cawed, 2 of the holes vanished. Looking behind Kakashi, Naruto asked, how did you notice me? Stepping up, he sat down. I'm guessing the fake hunter.nin taught you to black out your chakra? Naruto grinned. It's a good lesson, but that's just the first step. Now you have to assess the ambient chakra in the environment and control your output so it matches. Blacking out can't fool Junin, but a good chakra cloak can fool even Anbu. Naruto's eye had a glint that seemed to be searching for knowledge. Teaching the blonde he hadn't seen in what seemed like years made Kakashi feel at ease, almost too at ease. Was he not enraged with Naruto? Did they fare well? Kakashi knew Naruto better than Naruto knew Kakashi. Almost his entire life, Kakashi had kept a watchful eye on Naruto, but it was only a shadow. However, he was at a loss for words and lacked the confidence to ask for the boy's pardon even though he had done more than was right. Though the boy was undoubtedly brilliant and gifted, he wasn't. He didn't know how to tell Naruto that he had wanted to teach him but had ended up with the Uchiha instead. Instead, he inquired, how have you been? Where have you been? I've been studying the scrolls one picked up from Konoha, Naruto replied. The 4th scrolls don't do basics, but he explains jutsu very thoroughly, and I don't have any trouble with the dangerous chakra output stuff. It's because you possess an abundance of chakra, Kakashi corrected. The more chakra intensive jutsu should be easier for you. Most people wouldn't have trouble with things like bunshin, but you have trouble with them because you have this giant sea of chakra and no way to control how much output you have. Naruto nodded, eyes focused, and Kakashi felt, perhaps for the first time in his life, like a teacher. Naruto affirmed, so, techniques that use more chakra are easier. Something like that. Okay. Then I went through southern fire country first, but when summer hit and it got hot, I headed north. Wave just happened to be in my path, and I actually ended up around the border of mist and wave. Zabuza.san and Haku picked me up there, and for the past month I've been with them. Even though he already knew the answer, Kakashi still asked, the hunter.nin is part of your team. When Kakashi had mentioned the fake hunter.nin earlier, Naruto had remained silent, which had confirmed his suspicions. Sarutobi still paid him visits every other day, but Naruto appeared more reserved, as if he had been much younger. The recent loss had left the villagers more vulnerable and resentful. Back then, they hadn't been as hostile toward him. Usually, people would just ignore him. It appeared as though Naruto had received some attention, or perhaps this was his natural state and Konoha had just made him into a constant chatterbox of an idiot who was orange. Yeah, Haku's pretty cool. He's really loyal to Zabuza.san, and he talks strange sometimes, but he's nice and he knows a lot. He stopped and paused. You're not going to kill them, are you? Kakashi gave it some thought. At last, he said, we don't have to, but it would be easier to. Though, with your help, we should be able to reach an agreement. With that, Naruto exclaimed, I'll help. Actually Haku's pretty worried since both you and Asuma.san are here, and he doesn't think we're quite a match for too high level Junin. He stopped. You didn't hear that from me. Kakashi gave a small laugh. Well, I could take Zabuza by myself, and Asuma could take down both you and Haku, but you would probably be able to hurt some of the genin in the process. Naruto became silent. You're Sasuke's teacher, right? Kakashi felt a lump of dread well up inside. He ingested it whole. Yeah, I am. The air seemed heavy. He felt compelled to apologize and justify himself. The Sharingan was part of it, and it was a bad situation, and... Naruto interrupted with a shrug. I know. Zabuza told us a little about the Sharingan and the Uchihas when he was a little awake. He doesn't like them very much, or you for that matter. Calls you copycats and thieves. Where's Sakura? It required a moment for him to recall Sakura. He remembered the pink-haired girl, insecure and obsessive, assessed by the academy file as book smart and a potential candidate for medic training in the future. He had not given her any updates. She didn't seem to have much battle potential, and there were more issues than answers. I really don't know, he said. Asuma might know more, from what he says about Ino and her being friends. Naruto grinned. They used to be really good friends, he stated, but then they started fighting over Sasuke. Asuma-san is on my contact list. There are some people on it that I don't know how to identify, though. Kakashi thought about it. I could give you some descriptions. Show you the bingo book pages. Who are they? Jiraiya the Toad Sage, Junin Commander Nara Shikaku, and Intelligence Head Morino Ibiki, Naruto said. Nara Shikaku-san must be related to Shikamaru, but they can't look totally alike, right? Kakashi reached into his pouch and pulled out a bingo book. You probably won't see him. He usually stays in the village for management affairs these days. But for reference, he has the classic Nara look. The spiky black hair and pale, bored-looking face. He's only barely made it into the bingo book on account of being a high-level commander in Konoha. His bounty's pretty low too. Naruto rolled his eyes as he studied the image. He looks exactly like Shikamaru. I bet he's lazy like Shika too. I swear he didn't move at all even while I was attacking them. Kakashi grinned. Even though he was hostile to his friends in Konoha, Naruto appeared to be handling things well. He turned the pages. Jiraiya Sama is quite eccentric. You might actually see him, because he's in charge of Konoha's information network. Are there other information ninja? Naruto deflated a little, and Kakashi hurried to add, it's definitely an important and helpful position, it's just that usually we don't know where to get the information we need until after we have it already. And Jiraiya is a very famous ninja, and kind of infamous with the kunoichi, Kakashi thought, but didn't add. Not that I've heard of. Most of Jiraiya Sama's contacts are civilians or rouge ninjas. I don't think any ninja has been a full-time information gatherer, except maybe Jiraiya Sama himself. But then, I am, too. Naruto looked at Jiraiya's photo. He's very old, he remarked. And his hair looks funny. He's got tattoos like Kiba. Kakashi suppressed a chuckle. The Sandaime would have to hear about Jiraiya the Toad Sage being compared to the Inuzuka wolves. With a grave expression, he closed the book. Ibiki-san. Well, I hope you don't meet him either. He's always in the village, and the only reason you'd see him that I can think of is if you were taken in for interrogation as a spy. He doesn't have a bingo page. Naruto remarked, I ought to get one of these bingo books. Where do you get one? They're handed out by the village to active shinobi. There's a Chunin version, a Junin version, and a high version, for people with high enough classification to receive classified information on our missing.nin. Kakashi pondered this for a while. He handed Naruto the small green book and said, I have a high version, which might get you in trouble if you're caught with it, but it might be helpful for you. You can take it, I'll just get another. The Hokage will understand. He took it and stuffed it into his kunai pouch, saying, thanks. A brief, awkward silence fell between them. Kakashi was desperate to break the silence and make some use of the time, since he would depart in a week and they would go their separate ways. Finally, Naruto said, what's the plan? I have to get going before Haku misses me. Kakashi let out a sigh. Well, I'm hoping you can convince them to target Gato with us, take him out, and split the money half and half. That's unfair, Naruto interrupted. We'd be supplying all the inside information, plus we'd take a reputation hit from betraying a client. Naturally, a child on the streets would learn to barter, especially with the Merchants Guild's resentment toward Naruto. Kakashi laughed at the bartering and retorted, dead men don't tell tales. And we're supplying most of the firepower. The general outlook for civilians, or shinobi, had not been favorable due to this and the subsequent chaos and economic depression following the Kyuubi attack. Them, of course, meant the genin, and said, you're not letting them join in? Idly, Kakashi pondered when Naruto had begun to distance himself from them. Subsequently, he pondered whether they had ever truly been a group. After all, Naruto had been a little alone. You're going to be privy to it, he mentioned. But I actually meant me and Asuma. If we're the main force, people will be less likely to trace it back to you. I'm sure the Hokage will be okay with it too. Gato hasn't been good for trade. Naruto gave it some thought. In the end, he said, I guess it's fine, then. But I'll have to convince them first, make it seem like my idea, and then run with it. He stood up. If I come back with Haku, Zabuza-san, or both, pretend like you don't know me. I'm not an idiot. He pivoted, then paused. Water splashing at his Konoha Junin. Issue sandals. Kakashi waited patiently. Naruto said, I'll see you later, pausing to say, Kakashi, sensei. Kakashi snapped his head back. Asuma got to her feet a little too quickly for it to be casual only moments later. After taking a brief stock, Shikamaru reclined from the shogi board and whispered, don't walk away just because you're losing. He was in a commanding position, with Asuma and Shikamaru below him for lookout. While having breakfast with the family, the others were inside the house. They had the client with them. All right. 3 approaching, assault. With a quick fluttered Konoha sign language, Asuma raised her hands. The chakra signatures were not hidden. They were unmistakably Naruto, with his special chakra, Zabuza, and the distinct ice. Tainted chakra of the fake hunter. Nin, Haku. The Konoha Junin was the one they intended to notice their approach. Kakashi signed, wait. Tentative camaraderie. He hoped that Naruto's task had gone well, at the very least. If the two missed Nukanen thought he was plotting with Konoha Nin, goodness knows what they would do. Perhaps they are merely approaching under the guise of a truce, like a viper wrapped in white. He uttered the words, Asuma, sit back down and accept the loss like a man. Shikamaru whispered, what happened? To herself. Kakashi looked down, startled. With defensiveness, the Nara clarified, Maidaza Junin. Asuma approached the board across from Kakashi. Sensei and said, I know some KSL, and Asuma. Sensei said attack. What's going on, Kakashi? Sensei. The Junin said, it's plan A, Shikamaru, with a weary expression. If all goes well, we can take out Gato. The boy was sharp, a little too much for his own good, Kakashi thought, won't that be a diplomatic nightmare? It isn't an assigned mission and Wave is pretty far from us. With a sigh, Asuma leaned back on the withering grass. Ordinarily, this wouldn't be okay. It's a bit risky for a Genin team and not entirely within mission parameters. And Wave is actually the closest port to fire. We're right in the middle of the landmass but closer south, so Wave is our closest sea connection. Also, the Crimson River just east of Konohagakure flows through Wave's capital. If Wave is an economic asset, why didn't we help them before? Well, after the Kyuubi attack 12 years ago, Konoha was in no position to help neighboring countries. We still really aren't. And Wave is small. We've hardly had any missions pass through here, and never with a high Junin attached. On this team, we have 2 high Junin, both capable of making diplomatic decisions outside mission parameters, and we can choose to take down Gato. Why? I'm afraid, Shikamaru, the questions will have to end here, Kakashi said. The most noticeable person was Zabuza, a blob with a sword on his back. Naruto was to his left, and Haku was to his right. They're here. With his mask off, Haku held a senbon in his hand. Something warned Kakashi's senses. He hung his hand by his weapons pouch, very gingerly. 100 paces. Asuma cracked his neck and got back up. Shikamaru, acting unusually serious, gave me a single nod before bolting off. Shikamaru, go tell the others to come out and set up a 4-point rotating guard around the house. Asuma looked away from him and then at Kakashi. Are you sure they're friendlies, Kakashi? They've got metal out. 50. I said tentative friendlies, Kakashi remarked, sounding a little defensive. And Naruto's with them, but stay on guard. 25. Kakashi moved slightly, putting his weight on the balls of his feet to increase his speed as he prepared his chakra for a replacement. He felt the chakra building and saw Asuma shifting beneath him. He was sensitive to the use of chakra after spending so much time with the Sharingan. They were coming fast and were not going to slow down. Kakashi reluctantly and slowly pulled the kunai out a little. Zabuza's rough voice called, stop, a little too softly for the Konoha.nin to hear. His hand was on his sword, obviously ready to swing into battle, but he nodded at Naruto and the blonde bounded forward. Okay, kid, you said you'd be able to win them over. When he was about 10 meters away, he said, Kakashi, Senpai, and then, Asuma. Senpai. His hands flashed to let them know that he was Ichunin Nukanen. While his signing wasn't great by any means, Kakashi wasn't expecting much. It took him by surprise. The boy had learned it when, act as though. He scrambled for a phrase, bargain. I have a proposal for you. Kakashi complied. Why should we trust a Konoha Nukanen? I should kill you on the spot. He couldn't help but wonder if the missed Nukanen saw through the deception or if they believed Konoha to be that weak. Had Naruto been a true Nukanen, Kakashi would have killed him without hesitation. Zabuza was easy to deal with when he had another High Junin by his side, and if the 4 genin had managed to cooperate, his little protege could have easily lost. You are aware of the situation, Naruto scowled. He moved in closer. He would need to learn from Kakashi that during truce talks, one does not enter an enemy's lethal zone and leave the allies' immediate strike zone. And it's a mutually beneficial proposal that allows you to complete your assigned mission with no difficulties. It was a bit of a stretch, given Zabuza was a member of the 7 Swordsmen, but if you're talking about your little group there, Asuma sneered, we'd have no difficulties with that. But in the end, Kakashi knew he would die in front of 2 of Konoha's best, Asuma, a member of the daimyo's guard, and himself, a well-respected Anbu captain. Are they able to hear us now? Naruto slowly mouthed each gesture, making it difficult for Kakashi to understand. Afterwards, he would have to explain to the child that mouthing things was best done by talking. Normally, the lip movements became distorted as a result of overemphasizing. In any case, KSL was a better option. Now, Asuma, he replied, always overestimate your enemy. Asuma gave a snort. He raised his voice and said, let's hear your proposition. Listen to your own advice. Naruto paused at the lengthy word. The plan is, he began slowly, that we team up and go after Gato. We'll provide you inside information and help take them down by providing support and holding down the rest of the fort, and we can split Gato's money half each. He continued more confidently after noticing Kakashi's slight nod. Asuma objected, saying, if he has a will, we can't take his money. It's illicit funds, declared Naruto. Perfectly illegal and not anything he can leave behind. Gato's been making money running drug businesses and a prominent black market alongside his shipping business. He'll definitely have it in cash and it won't be recorded or anything. And after this, Zabuza wants to go back to Mist to help the civil war, which is something Konoha has wanted over for a while. Kakashi moved his hands and gave Asuma a tap. We're having lovely weather today. He saw a twitch in Asuma's face. It's not very cloudy. Asuma gave a headshake. Don't make light of things. This could be harmful. Furthermore, KSL isn't entirely secure. The majority of the firepower will come from us, Kakashi declared. Splitting it half and half is not fair. How about 3/4 to us and 1 to you? A little shocked, Naruto nearly yelled, what the? Asuma gave him a strange look as Kakashi released a small amount of killing intent and said, no, we're providing all the inside information. Please, Zabuza does that to me all the time. I'm not scared of you. Kakashi let out a little more, increasing the pressure as he anticipated Naruto's breaking moment. Then he stopped suddenly. I think it sounds good, he stated. Asuma. Asuma nodded and rolled his eyes. Okay, you can go tell Bandages we're good with it. With a nod, Naruto leapt away. They observed him leave. It was after a while that Asuma asked, do you really think he'll be okay? After saying, he's more than you think, Kakashi ended the conversation. After they had gotten halfway back and were out of earshot, Zabuza asked, what did he say? He agreed, was Naruto's response, more of a query. That Zabuza already knew. I already know that, sneered Zabuza. It was obvious enough when they didn't kill you and let you come back to us. I mean, what did they say, when they agreed? Naruto scowled. He muttered, he just said it sounded good. Zabuza let out a sigh. My goodness, kid, don't you know how to listen? People don't talk with their mouths alone. What was he looking at? What was he thinking? What was his reasoning behind agreeing to our plan? You should know yourself that we had about a 40.60 chance of getting it. Naruto gave a headshake. We'll make it easier for them to take Gato down, and Gato's been controlling trade through here for a while. The towns I passed on the way here, even in Konoha, suffer a little from him, and they should be thinking about the safety of their students, because, he said, bittersweet recollections coming and going. Konoha always puts the team first. That's what they were thinking. They'll complete their mission and more, and nobody's in danger. Isn't it best when everybody lives to see another day? Zabuza ignored him, concentrating only on making the next tree jump. After a short while, Haku looked over and chuckled. Zabuza grunted, but his tone was not the same as usual when he said, Konoha ninja, as Naruto assumed the conversation had finally ended. Naruto suppressed a grin. Contrary to popular belief, assassinations were not best carried out at midnight. No, the best chance was to get up very early in the morning, say 3 or 4 o'clock, when the sun was just beginning to circle back around the nations, and that was when Kakashi entered Gado's stronghold at 350. Not that he was overly concerned. He wasn't reckless, though. Shinobi who were good never took chances. But with insiders on his side and Asuma waiting just outside the compound, Kakashi knew he was equal to the low Chunin brutes and the civilian grunts when it came down to it. No, Kakashi wasn't concerned. He didn't need to be. He could have stormed through the warehouse in the middle of the day if he and Asuma had wanted to. Shinobi techniques were incomparable to those of concrete walls. Despite their excellent training, the civilian guards were likewise insignificant. However, that would be a mess. Many families in tears, many deaths, and lots of blood. Kakashi disliked weeping families. And thus, assassination occurred. A flashback to his days at Anbu. A bit sweet, a bit bitter, and a bit familiar. And hardly any blood at all, nor many tears. At times, Kakashi believed that a strategically placed poison or skillfully thrown kunai could solve all of the world's problems. Or not even, he could use a knife, a clumsy way of shifting the blame, to accuse a civilian, though the sly entrance and exit still shouted Shinobi. He didn't even need to be present. In actuality, he could kill Gado and any poison testers the man might have with slow acting poison if he had allies in Zabuza and the others. The Nukanen didn't even require him, really. However, Kakashi knew that this was a safer option for Zabuza, and he carried the weight of Konoha with him, along with Asuma. And normally, he would not have the slightest sympathy for a stupid Nukanen who dared to use Kakashi for his own gain, but Naruto was on their side. And thus, assassination occurred. Kakashi disappeared down the corridors. His father had taught him to move when he was much, much younger, almost before he could remember. At first, he was unaware that the game was a lesson. He enjoyed it, just as he had loved most things involving his father back when the White Fang was still a living, breathing man. It had something to do with tiptoeing, surprising tickle attacks, and sneaking around. Although his father had told him that the walls had ears, Kakashi now understood that Tsukumo's own ears were unaffected by the walls. But Kakashi was certain that at this point, not even the imaginary ears of the wall, that is, his father's ears, would be able to capture him. Skewing still another pointless security measure, Kakashi fingered a kunai. It wouldn't be difficult to use a well-aimed kunai to kill Gado by simply breaking through a nearby wall, ceiling, or floor. Or, he could take out the guards and politely remove Gado through the door. He would use a blade in either case. He would observe as the pudgy man's veins pounded out lifeblood. He would hold out until the tycoon's last breath and last shred of hope were gone. It was the only way to kill someone the right way, and Kakashi had never been a fan of the battlefield's fast kills. Murder was something that was best done slowly and thoughtfully. It was impossible to create with such carelessness. The heavy weight of a stolen life and what that might mean to spouses, friends, or small Kakashis. It was an obligation to bear, an obligation that could never be burdened excessively. He'd been exploring the stronghold for far too long, so he made the decision to take out the guards. He had no desire to break down a wall and find another room. There wouldn't be any furniture or architectural damage, and the kill would be polite and even legal. Kakashi quickly used chakra to cut the locks off, and the door opened with ease. The large bay windows were closed, and the carpet was plush. Gado was comfortably stretched out over his bed. A single prayer was sent up by Kakashi as the life left Gado's body. He had given up trying to explain it a long time ago. There was no excuse for murder, all that was required was an apology. Please pardon me. Naruto took off. He would have strolled, but Wave was a large island with Tezuna's residence and Gado's headquarters situated on opposite ends. Zabuza wanted to get out before dawn, so it was likely 3 in the morning at this point in the night. Naruto occasionally felt that the large man without eyebrows was a bit too dramatic for his own good. It never hurts to get a few extra hours of sleep, really. However, Zabuza claimed as much, and Haku consistently agreed with him. Additionally, Naruto had nothing better to do. So he ran, occasionally leaping into trees if there were any, while carrying the heavy trunk of money on his back. Perhaps because everything that could be eaten had been dug up and consumed, the vegetation was rather sparse. Though he disliked recalling those times, Naruto had also consumed dubious wild foods in the past. A few of the foods he had tried were pretty disgusting. As a result, Naruto forced his thoughts to focus only on his feet hitting the ground, the wind's sharp, cold scent, and the locations he imagined he was running to. Now that he was almost at his destination, he was in a difficult situation. Without running the risk of being noticed by any of the Konoha ninja who were probably on guard, he hoped to leave the money and leave. It would be excruciating to be discovered by one of his former classmates. Furthermore, Naruto was still unsure of how to feel about Kakashi. who was much too kind and helpful, and he wasn't sure why, which unnerved him. Furthermore, he couldn't simply leave the cash outside the house for any hapless bystander to find. Zabuza would take his life. Naruto found Sasuke sleeping with his back to a tree while he was talking himself out of leaving it through the window or at the front door. Just picture their reactions when they woke up to find a large pile of cash in the living room. And for an instant, the only thing he saw was a young child perched on the edge of a bridge. There were those who hated and those who loved, and perhaps they weren't all that different after all. Subsequently, Sasuke appeared before him, brandishing a kunai with a backward grip while glancing around for a chance to strike Naruto. Naruto had seen him most clearly through the holes in his mask, always looking, always straining, for something he didn't know. However, the moment was gone. Holding the trunk firmly, Naruto pondered. Sasuke inhaled. Silently, he placed the cash down next to his potential teammate. He squatted there for a moment, not sure that it was appropriate to leave like that. Naruto eventually found words. It wasn't all about him, though, so he continued, "The next time I see you, I hope you find whatever you're looking for." He wanted to add, "Believe it," but it was just a hope, not yet a truth, and the words were sufficient as they were. "The next time I see you, I hope we are standing on the same side. I hope you acknowledge me," he said. It seemed appropriate. Naruto shot up into the trees with a sudden burst of chakra, using exactly the little to nothing that Haku had taught him. Renting a boat allowed Zabuza to leave the island. As shinobi, Haku quite rightly pointed out, they could walk on the water and avoid paying for a boat rental. Alternatively, Haku could freeze a path for them, which he said wouldn't be too difficult and which Naruto now fervently desired to see. An icy trail across the water. Let's get serious about this. Pun intended, coolest thing ever? Zabuza, though, shook his head. "We're going to mist, not freaking Konoha," he replied. He didn't say, freaking, though. Furious at Zabuza's choice of adjectives, Naruto exclaimed, "What does that have to do with anything? Konoha is better than mist. At least we're not bloody ripping ourselves." Zabuza rolled his eyes as Haku quickly covered his mouth with his hand. Naruto tried his hardest to spit spittle all over Haku's hand. "Someday your mouth is going to kill you, brat," he replied. "I only hope I'm there to see it happen, because it should be embarrassing and very funny." Haku removed it, as if he was certain Naruto couldn't bring up a sensitive topic with Zabuza from that. Alternatively, it could have been that he was grossed out by the amount of slobber Naruto had managed to get on his hand. Naruto said, "What am I going to do? Bite myself to death?" Several months spent with Zabuza had greatly improved his sarcasm. "There was that time you bit your tongue really hard and you thought you were going to die," Haku said. Naruto gave a furious yelp. "That was your fault. You cooked that weird fish thing and then expected me to just." Zabuza let out a sigh. Haku seemed perfectly content with that, saying, "This conversation is going nowhere. We're using a boat because I say so. Let's go." If he accepted, "because I say so," as an argument, Naruto reasoned, there was a serious problem with Haku's logic. Still, he trailed behind. "Can you still show us your freezing waterpath thing? Ooh, what if you made the ice thing and we slid across it on the boat like a sled? Wouldn't that be fun? Hey?" Tsurumi Mei was undoubtedly crazy. With one less eyebrow, Zabuza left the claustrophobic excuse for an office. Haku left with lipstick on his cheek. And Naruto made a new friend. Zabuza resolutely ignored the two stealths shadowing their movement as Naruto chattered about how cool she was and if she could teach him how to spit lava, and Haku edged away cautiously as if his admiration of the woman could spread. One slightly sour comment was allowed by him. "Ah, how nice it is to be trusted." Haku simply gives him a skeptical yet receptive glance, but Naruto's look is more ambiguous. He smiles, a glint of understanding in the blonde's eyes. Ultimately, whether you understood them or not, they were all just tools sharpening tools. Mei dismissed Ao's worries with a smile. "Zabuza's an old friend, and he brought us a hefty sum as a gift. As for the two brats, one is obviously on our side, for his own hide if nothing else. And the tree. Hugger is just a naive kid. It doesn't matter if he's sincere or not. He's a chakra powerhouse that can spam shadow clones. We can use that." She chuckled. In the humid airs of war, it was a brittle laugh, insincere and rusted. "A communication system," with some hesitation, Naruto repeated. "How can the cage Bunshin do that?" Mei refused to put her hands over her head. The child had no idea what to do. Her rebuke softened as she reached out to tousle his hair. "Do you know anything about the forbidden technique that you're spamming all over the place? Or have you been using it like some mindless drone?" she asked. Mei liked the Konoha Nukanen despite herself, and he pouted up at her like a child, leaning into her hand. Mei enjoyed gambling, and he posed a risk. Naruto grumbled, "It's not like anybody taught me. I learned it from reading a scroll." Mei hurriedly clarified, "It's a matter of application," as she attempted to comprehend the blonde's many feats, including her chakra, casual use of seals, and lightning. Fast reflexes. The clones can go anywhere, and when one pops it transmits information to you immediately. It's communication at unrivaled speed across distances. "Oh," he uttered. Then, "So, if it's so great, aren't you already doing it?" Mei slaps him lightly on the top of the head and says, "Idiot." She was grinning down at him like the submissive puppy he'd painted himself as. But she was also saying, "Do you think everybody can put out 100 shadow clones and still move? Maybe you've been using it too much, if such a thing is possible, and it's addled your brains." "Ow, sorry, Naruto murmurs, his thoughts racing through potential excuses. He gives the leader of the Mist Rebellion a silly smile, but he keeps his thoughts to himself, saying nothing. He believes that it shouldn't require a lot of chakra or something as laborious as going through hours worth of clone memories. A few furu bound in the appropriate seal ought to work out pretty well. So, how should I approach it? So, how many clones do you need? The team took a few weeks to get used to the blonde shadow. Kimmy was the last to warm up, finding it difficult to accept that the chatty little boy who had gone with them to guard the river pass was only a chakra construct, an imprint of a real personality, with no deeper significance than what the technique produced. He talked frequently about foods he enjoyed eating, things he had seen, and dreams he had had. He seemed so real. He was surprisingly innocent and childlike for a Nukanon. He was strangely real for a mass of condensed energy and will. He was too much of a team player for the method that would be their updater and panic cord. The only thing that set him apart was that after making a report about himself, he would promptly kill himself, and there would be two of them for a short while before the old vanished every month or two, depending on how frequently reports needed to be made. Yura, who had welcomed Naruto the most into their group, turned out to be the one who was most cautious of him, and Kimmy found herself talking to the boy who was listening far too intently for the most part of her time. No matter how advanced, Yura believed she was insane for spending so much time with what amounted to just another weapon in the war. Kimmy, though, was a storyteller. She was the Kiri Tsunamoriji's shaman, and she carried within her all the folktales that her people had been telling since the Sage of Six Paths, from mother to daughter. Storytellers were unnecessary for Mist, and warriors had no use for tales, but her life was made up of words and everything that could not be expressed in words. The days were tedious and protracted. They rotated their foraging to prevent depleting the wildlife in any one area as they scavenged throughout the surrounding forest. Every now and then shipments arrived, each accompanied by the signal of the frog song, and sometimes there were extra luxuries for them. Living in this small rebel outpost was a safe but unglamorous job. Their combat skills were insufficient to give them a meaningful role in the fighting, but they were skilled enough at detection to be able to perform guard duty. One ship's guard, cradled in a bundle of provisions, thrust a tiny packet of tea into their hands. They drank tea country genmaicha that day, and after that Yura and Shota went back to scout for ambushes. When they were gone, she filled their cups with water and gave him a little. Her team felt that it was too valuable to waste on a chakra construct, but a story went better with warm tea. While sipping their drinks, she pondered over war and addressed her receptive audience. She informed Naruto, the daimyo was born for war, but his brother was born for peace. Perhaps the warrior did not know what to do with happiness, with quiet blessed tranquility. For those who grow feeding on victory cannot know rest. So when you eat of the fruits of conquest, and feast in the halls of triumph, drink also of the waters of giving with no price, the most quiet of loves, lest you become king of only war. Such a crown is plastic, not golden. Naruto informed Mei, there's another shipment coming, following a few quiet moments spent sorting through the memories of campfire tales. Grasping the logs with his hands, he channeled wind chakra while seated cross-legged on the ceiling. ETA is 2 weeks, and they have tea this time. Good, Mei replied, taking a sip of her favorite genmaicha, furiously annotating maps, and rearranging contract papers. I'm running out. Suzaku came from a line of Ronin and was the son of a skilled swordsman. Before they came for his parents, his mother was a witch of the green thumb and a weed whisperer. His father had been killed by Yagura. Hers was a bloodline, so it was condemned, but all she could do was influence the plants she grew so they had intriguing properties when they retained her chakra. He continued to grieve for them, so he picked up the sword and headed to the rebellion. Raiding administration storage and dispersing blinded murderers was not a noble job. Murderers, not warriors, deceived by falsehoods to disregard the pain of those they were sworn to defend. Suzaku always thought that honor was a prerequisite for power and that might made right. Mist was no longer a place of honor. At first, he was irritated by their orange shadow, as May liked to refer to the replicas of her tiny pet Kona Hanukkinen. What honor was there to the boy deserter? How much did he know about pain? How could he enter Mist with a waltz and consider the strong but struggling people petty? But Suzaku was taken aback repeatedly. After a few casual remarks and some late-night discussions, the orange shadow transformed into something much more than just a shadow. More like a light, a friend. Someone who, in some way, managed to slip in spice jars without being noticed. Possibly even the Mizukage himself, since who in these days had such luxury? Only because Suzaku previously stated that, before the world forced his hand to the sword, he had wanted to be a cook. Suzaku was, oh, so angry. However, he was also content, and contentment was so uncommon that any amount of it was precious. The North Kura storage expedition is successful. Passing him a memo, May says, these are their next plans. After all, Noragumi had once dreamed of becoming a shinobi. Before the family left and it was just her and the bees and the anger, Suzume was just a branch member, happy to raise bees her entire life. There was only Mina and a grave, and then there were twins Mina and Nina. Though she was no longer able to, Suna continued to visit his sister's child every other weekend to see how things were going. Kimi perished in an unexpected ambush. Ships never arrived, and the rebellion would not receive any more for another month until a different land passage was located and secured. After being outmatched in a battle that resulted in the loss of his right hand, Suzaku trained with his left. At times, while he was at the wok, clumsily using his left limb to wield a spatula, he would cry over it. The sound of frying meat did not completely mask the muffled sobs, even though he believed the fumes concealed the liquid on his cheeks. Ambush at a point, Noragumi. Suzume, abandoned and without a support system, took refuge in a filthy white room. Mina's left eye was gone, and she was unable to find Nina in the mirror. And more, still more. While Naruto was always forgetting the books Iruka made them read, he was able to recall every name, every story, and every pointless meal. Every act of kindness that he had never experienced before, every smile and laugh shared, each precious moment made doubly bittersweet by the perspective that comes with memories. Everything about it, even the cruel comments and the insignificant things that came out of his continued distinction and marking as different or inferior in some way, was lovely to look back on. In tragedy, the good things outnumbered the bad, and there was only loss to be mourned. 100 new pals, and every one of them lost, in one way or another, and would never be located. And a shadow, vanished as the light struck, nothing more than a tap or a jutsu, unable to do more than file a small report in a small office for a deadly cause. Conflict. Her home was a total wreck in the middle of a destroyed city, unsalvageable rubble. Sakura's parents were buried 6 feet under, not because they were romantic, loving, or considerate, but rather because she lacked the strength to dig 2 graves in the family plot. She had lost all arm muscle that she had ever accumulated. Sakura had been watching a dress shop during her exams, but now the stadium where she had discovered their bodies had vanished, and Tsunami.san was nowhere to be seen. Sakura felt as though her entire future had vanished, turning to dust. She now regretted her decision to watch the exams because she couldn't bear to go. She wished, in the bitter dark of grief, that she had passed away with her parents. They hadn't been close before they discovered her sobbing and broken following her failure to pursue her dream. After their stubborn daughter followed a deadly dream, they had not been close for many years. However, when they found her sobbing in her room, they were the ones to comfort her and give her the strength she needed to go on. Sakura felt the silk with her needle, but it didn't feel quite right. She began sewing and peered over the store, its front window blown out, its backlog of orders piled on the counter, and the people hurriedly jumping from roof to roof. After that, she picked up the needle, sewn the seam, and walked out of the store. She entered the hospital, pulled a woman by the shoulders, and secured her long hair in a bun. She felt the tears streaming down her face, but for once, she didn't care. Saying, "I'll do anything you need," she spoke. "Just don't let me be useless anymore. I don't want to be alone anymore." The bewildered nurse angrily said, "What can you do? Just what do you think you can do?" Another drew her aside and said something kind. "We don't have time to waste, but if you have any skills, we'll take them and use them," she said softly to Sakura before turning around again. "I can sew a dozen kinds of stitches and do noble, commissioned embroidery," she stated. He continued, recalling a dream from his early years, saying, "I have eidetic memory and 99% chakra efficiency." The nurse laughs in a way that begs to be believed. However, she takes Sakura's hands and looks at their scars. It talks about the long hours she put in at her mother's best friend's shop. hoping to somehow make up for years she didn't have, and about Tsunami's generosity to her family. Attempting to find herself in the shadows and find a way to contribute once more. I don't know about the second or third child, but if you can sew even half as well as you claim, we can use you. And if you have 99% chakra efficiency, a second chuckle, then forget about useful. You'll end up wishing you had fewer uses, but there's few rewards greater than what you'll find here. Here lie the high and the low of human life and death. Yes, Sakura mumbles, remembering the plot without markers and the shovel in the damp ground. The nurse looks at her, her expression softening. You don't know what you're getting into, kid, she stated, and one day you'll hate me for this. Next, she dragged Sakura through the doors. By the time he arrived at the office, it was midday. May glanced at him while sipping her tea. You're running late, she said. He declared, I can no longer do this. May was a strict woman who expected greatness from both her supporters and herself. Naruto knew that her world was tainted by the battle she was fighting, even though she had grown fond of him. It was a fight against injustice, against those who desired to see families bloodshed, and against injustice. Though Naruto no longer sees Haku and Zabuza at all, it was their cause. All he did was sleep and dream of things he had never done, people he had never dined with, and friends he had never met, but he wanted to believe, wanted to make a difference in this dark country. When Naruto closed his eyes, he saw death and 1,000 hours that he had not lived. He felt old, weary, and helpless to change. A brief silence ensued, during which May heard her grandmother's fountain pen being passed down to her and papers being shuffled against deals and contracts that needed to be signed. For freedom, we need food, money, people, and lives. Fairness. Maybe she compared Naruto to an unfathomable standard as well. Take a break, commanded the rebel leader. I'll see you back in 3 days. On the morning of the last day, he heard a voice call him, Naruto. When Naruto turned, he saw nothing. Just the pulsating heart of the seaside, to which he had fled via paths he had never taken but knew so well. Searching for Haku, he discovered the young man in the hospital, dressing wounds, his hands glowing green. However, Naruto was unable to meet the men's eyes directly. In any case, he didn't know how to bandage, so it felt a bit like lying. He thus left without bothering Haku. Even Zabuza, who was presumably off sabotaging important things, was nowhere to be found. The papers he was holding were little bits of incomprehensible scrawls that only he knew contained the ideas sealed to a seal that would theoretically accomplish the same task he was performing for the rebellion. Take his place. Similar to the picture development seal, which was marketed as a camera by a rock nin, it captured the patterns of color and light that the user's eyes saw. Naruto had quickly perused the underlying theory, which included intricate details about brain anatomy and how sight elicited electrical signals. Naruto used a workaround that combined wind chakra theory to pass the information as a wave in the air, so that instead of actual teleportation, the picture would, theoretically, transport at nearly instantaneous speeds from one seal to the other. Time. Space seals were notoriously difficult and required such personalization that use was nearly always incredibly limited. Thus, the receiving seal was the opposite of the first one in that it would utilize the signals that were recorded to activate the same neurons in the receiving brain, causing the image to obscure the user's vision as long as chakra was used. Sending still photos that are superimposed over the recipient's field of vision, or entire visual fields as far as the eye could see, would suffice. However, despite his admiration for the mist cause, Naruto was a Konoha ninja and could not rationalize giving his invention to them. He felt that he needed the support of one or more of his contacts, particularly in light of the events in Wave. But, out here on the other side of a vast expanse of ocean, there was no way to get in touch with one. Thus, he found himself at the river's mouth, contemplating how streams consistently reached the ocean and where he was meant to go. He was incredibly exhausted, worn out from his never-ending education, from all the tales and from everyone giving a boy who seemed to have boundless hope so much hope. The voice called out, Naruto, once more, and this time Naruto directed his chakra toward his ears. A single, sharp-edged cloud, birds, tiny dead man-o-wars on the beach, and a man in the trees all sprang to mind. Saying, Kakashi. Sensei, he turned to face the man he had once detested but who had now become a mentor to him. The Hokage is dead. It's time to go home.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.